Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. We're going to cover lots of information tonight, lots of great details. Kevin and I will do a market update. And then, of course, we'll bring in our wealth and estate planning specialist, Adam Buss. He'll cover lots when it comes to the health benefits in retirement. Before we get too far, though, Adam, or Kevin, you're right in front of me. There we go. We can't go too far without making the lawyers happy. I always have to show this every presentation. We need to put the disclaimer on the screen, so I'll ramble for a little bit while we have that up there. I will mention for questions, I know a few folks had typed questions into the comment section before we even began, which is fantastic. Please continue to do that throughout the presentation. We can see those questions. We can see those comments. We'll do our best to address them throughout the evening. The questions that are already there, we are going to tackle those. Adam will tackle them when he does his presentation, and then we'll certainly address the other questions as they come in, and we'll have a bit of time at the end of the presentation as well. So there'll be lots of opportunity to tackle that. Before we get too much into Adam's presentation, talking health benefits, what's covered by Canada's medical system, what might need extra coverage, and then all the different options you can pick and the different costs for those different options. There'll be lots of great detail, but let's start with the markets, Kevin. We need to do an update. Things have been turbulent in September and October. Let's tell folks what happened and then dive into our forecast. Starting with what happened, though, I think we need to talk about inflation.
Yeah, I think the whole thing that we've got to start with from 2022 going forward has been the fact that we've had inflation that's come. We've had the highest inflation that we've had in the last 40 years over the last number of years. And again, this sort of started out of the pandemic. First, it was listed as, oh, well, we're okay. It's all transitory inflation. And then when the pandemic basically ended, we saw that inflation didn't stop. It just kept going up and up and up and up. And then again, as I say, we hit an unprecedented level we haven't had in 40 years. And that lasted for a short period of time. And then we started to see the correction come in. And that blue line on here that you're seeing, I mean, the yellow line is the CPI inflation number for the Bank of Canada. And the blue line is basically the target rate. Now, the Fed in the States runs the same target rate. They want inflation between 1% and 3%. And as you can see for, the last 25 years for sure plus, they've basically kept it in there. And as we are right now, we saw it touch there at about 3. Now we're a little bit higher than that, and we're at that sticky inflation point. But that's basically what's gone on and caused a lot of the market turbulence that's happened. But how did we get the inflation from the high down to the low, Clint? What was the big factor going on with this?
Absolutely. And I'll bring this back on. You can see the 2022, that 21, 22 period, a big spike in that yellow line, and then it came right back down. And how that happened, really, it's interest rates. The Bank of Canada raised rates, but not just did they raise rates, but the speed at which they raised and the magnitude of the increase was like we have not seen before. Pull this up. This is not the Bank of Canada rate. This is from the major chartered banks, the prime rate. So it gives you a good idea of what the prime lending rate is, which is for your variable lending products. And you can see it went from essentially a low, the lowest point we'd seen in a few decades, to one of the highest points we'd seen in a few decades, essentially tripled in a matter of 1 year. We've had high rates before, Kevin. We've seen rate increases before. Never have we seen a tripling of the prime rate in 1 year. So that speed of an increase and that magnitude of the increase was frankly historic. That's what railed in inflation, that kind of reeled it back in, but it also had other consequences. Clearly, it impacted mortgage rates, had an impact on the real estate market for investors. We know stocks can be turbulent. Rates do factor into stock markets, but it also has a big impact on the bond market. And bonds are typically seen as safer. They normally don't get a lot of volatility, but this historic speed and size of an interest rate increase had an impact on the bonds as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're used to volatility in the stock market. Whether it goes down 10% or even a 20% decline, you're going to see that. You saw that in 2022, and then you get a rebound that comes on. That is typical. We know that the markets go up and down when it deals with the stocks. Bonds, though, that fixed income piece, that is usually your safer venture. It doesn't matter what seems to be happening in the bond or in the stock market, your bonds are fairly safe. But with this unprecedented and historic increase in interest rates, we've seen bond prices go down. Now, the chart we've got in front of us is the XBB. It's the Canadian Universal Bond Index and incorporates a variety of different Canadian bonds in it. And we've seen this drop over that time frame about 25%. That is unprecedented. We haven't had that number go down before. And again, this is all because of how fast interest rates rose. And of course, we know as yields go up, bond prices go down. And that's what we've seen. So, I mean, when you're dealing with a yield that maybe on 5 years was less than 2% and now is over 5, you're going to have an adjustment in that bond price. And that's what we've seen. Again, unprecedented, not normal that way, but that's the way the bond markets move based on the interest rate increases. But again, there's more to it than just that. There's seasonality too.
Absolutely. And we'll touch on that. But a reminder, the chart we just showed, as Kevin mentioned, that was for the bond market.
Yes.
That wasn't an individual portfolio or someone's personal experience. It just shows you that that unprecedented increase in rates had quite the hit on the overall bond market. But for most folks, that's the safer part of the portfolio where you normally don't see volatility, or this time around, you did see volatility. That was the big change in the last 18 months. In terms of the stock market, we'll talk about that and the bond market. But first, with the stock market, what we believe is on the horizon. I'll pull this up. It's the Canadian Stock Market Index, the TSX. It gives you some seasonality data. And it looks from 1980 all the way to 2023, so fairly current, and a wide range of data there. And it looks at the average return per month to give you an idea of how the market typically performs throughout the course of a year. And lo and behold, the worst on that chart, Kevin, by far is September. It's quite the negative month on average, and it lived up to its billing. It was a turbulent September this year as well. And you'll notice another one of the smallest bars there is October. So that September-October period typically is turbulent. That is the normal seasonality of the Canadian stock market. That was the case certainly in 2023 with a turbulent September and a rough October as well. The reason we bring that up is to give you some context for the turbulence. Often that's when we see turbulence, and we saw it during a period where typically markets are rough. That gives us a little more indication this could be more of a correction rather than the start of a big crash. Not everything to do with seasonality, but that certainly gives you a bit of context. And then continuing that, if we see more of that trend, look at the biggest bars on that chart. What are they? They're November and December. So that's the year-end rally. That's what we likely see on the horizon for the Canadian market. There's other reasons as well that we'll touch on, but the seasonality certainly plays in our favor for that year-end rally. We'll focus also on the U.S. here, Kevin. And the U.S. has something unique Canada doesn't have, which helps for data, and that's a fixed election cycle. So we can do a bit of analysis around that.
Yeah, and just beforehand, that last chart, isn't it just like they took 2023 and took the playbook and read it the exact same way that it's going? We're seeing that perfectly. But yeah, as you've just mentioned, we're into the U.S. election cycles now. If you take a look at the 4-year cycle, and again, as Clint mentioned, we do have set U.S. elections as opposed to here in Canada, we're seeing the same thing sort of play out. If we look at that 2023 area, we're seeing that sort of late August, straight through to October, has been a downward trend that's gone on. And over the historical time frame, which is the 4-year cycle on the left scale, you're seeing that's usually that moderate, maybe flat, little bit down before things go. But as we've seen every other time, when you get to that actual election year, which is 2024 next year, markets have generally been on an upward trend. And a lot of those factors can be put into things along the lines of, you're looking at possibly a new government coming in, new policies, there's that changeover. It gives more of a euphoria. People are excited because they think that something new is going to be coming down the line that's going to help them out moving forward. And that usually tends to lead to bigger markets moving upward. And that's what we're seeing here. Again, same sort of track record going on.
Absolutely. And we'll touch quickly on the pre-election. This is in a similar vein to what you just talked about, Kevin. The election cycle in the U.S. Pre-election year, this is Ryan Dietrich. Pre-election years 2023 is one of those years. And again, Canadian has followed the seasonality almost to the playbook so far in 2023. U.S. market has followed the pre-election trend almost to the playbook as well. Strong first half of the year, turbulence in that September-October time period. And then what follows would be the year-end rally. Those are quick pieces on seasonality. I'll pull this up so we can look at a larger view of what we think is ahead, a couple of different pieces. We mentioned the year-end rally. There's a number of reasons for that. Seasonality is one piece. Another is we think interest rates and by extension inflation are at a peak, and we would not be surprised if they were falling throughout 2024. So we are expecting to see rates decline probably in the latter half of 2024. That's the expectation. That'll dovetail with smaller inflation. Doesn't mean inflation is nothing, but perhaps lower than 4%. That could be another reason we could see a year-end rally. And then 2024, you already mentioned it is an election year in the U.S. Election years tend to be quite strong. What we have seen this year has been U.S. outperformance. The U.S. tech sector specifically has been quite strong. That's pushed to some strong U.S. markets, much better than the Canadian markets. We think that trend will continue into 2024. So it gives you an idea of where we think things are heading, where we think there will be some strength in 2024, specifically in the U.S. But Kevin, I've learned this over the years. The market does not care what I think. I could have all the opinions and stories of the world. It doesn't mean they'll perfectly play out. So we have to remain nimble. What are we going to watch to change our mind?
Yeah, and knowing that economics is more of a social science, it's not an exact science. The
Yeah.
rationale is because there are things that can happen that change your views going forward. And for us, some of those changes are, first of all, persistent inflation. You could have the inflation staying where it is, or even if it increases. If you get that sort of a scenario, that could very much change what goes on in the marketplace. And as a result, you get that higher interest rates for a longer period of time. So if inflation's persistent, the governments, I mean, not the governments, the Bank of Canada, the Fed are going to keep their rates higher for longer. And that, of course, could lead to recession down the line. Now, that's been a big talk that everybody's been talking about recently is it soft landing? Is it recession? At this point, we don't know, but the longer you go, chances
Mhm.
are you may get that recession scenario going forward. Now, escalation of geopolitical tensions have also played a part in what's going on. In 2022, it was Russia invading Ukraine. We saw what happened with commodity prices there. Right now, you've got the Israel-Hamas thing going on. If that expands in the Middle East, Iran and a few others come in, then you could have energy problems. So again, all these things have a big factor going on. And finally, the last one would be sort of a shift in the technicals. Right now, Clint and I think that, market is probably oversold a little bit. But again, there are technical factors there, a certain number. If it falls below it, market could go even lower based on that technical. Or if it goes above, same sort of thing happens. If you get above a certain point, you could get a bigger breakout going to the upside. So all these things will have a bit of a play as to how things will forward and could make us change our mind from what's going on.
Absolutely. I know we did that quickly. We want to touch a few of the highlights, what's going on in the market. We'll bring Adam on to help kind of change the gear and talk a little more about health benefits. I see some questions already in the comment section related to health benefits in retirement, which is fantastic. Continue to type those in, or even if you have a market question for Kevin and I, we're happy to tackle that as well. We can expand on any of the points that we mentioned. I'm not seeing too many of the market related ones coming in. So I think people want to see the key presenter here, Kevin. We're getting the
Yes,
hint.
they do. Yeah, without further ado, I guess it's time to bring in our wealth and estate planning specialist, Adam Buss, and have his expertise on what we can deal with in health benefits.
Absolutely. I'll tee up a couple of the questions here because I know it's throughout the presentation. So for folks that ask the questions, the answer is coming. One of them specifically was that Canada does provide some health care. So do we need extra coverage in retirement? How much would that cost? All those type of ideas. Another one, someone is sharing a story specifically related to the coverage they were getting as it related to dental coverage, and eventually fired the provider because they didn't think it was worthwhile. So perhaps you can touch on some of that as well. So without further ado, Adam, take it over.
Excellent. Thank you again for having me here. And as they had mentioned, my name is Adam Buss. I'm the Wealth and Estate Planning Specialist here at the Canaccord branch in Winnipeg, here to help with your financial planning, insurance needs as well. So part of the services that we do offer is encompassed here. So not only do you have access to your investment advisor, you have access to myself in the Wealth and Estate Planning division, which involves succession planning, financial planning, insurance, wealth transfer strategies, legacies, all those fun and exciting things. We are here to help you with and identify what is important to you and how can we help you accomplish those goals. So just a little plug there as to everything that we can do for you. So, as with all planning, life certainly can happen, right? Um, Insurance or even just building a financial plan is designed to give you peace of mind for the unknown. Nobody can accurately predict exactly what's going to happen every step of the way in your life, and it's okay if things go, a little bit sideways, as the little diagram shows here. Not everything goes to plan, so we want to revisit the numbers. We want to revisit your plan, your insurance strategy, just to make sure it's the right solution still for your set of circumstances as it continuously evolves. I know Clinton and Kevin already made the lawyers happy, but I'll continue to make the lawyers happy. I don't have a little blurb. We're going to go through some insurance quotes. We're going to go through some insurance topics, some tax information. All of this is not designed to answer questions specific to your situation or give you that direct tax or legal advice. Please ask either Clinton, Kevin, or of course your tax or legal expert as it pertains to your unique set of circumstances. So let's dive into it. So, how to manage healthcare costs in retirement. So, that's what we want to look at. And that does tie to the peace of mind aspect for the unknown, right? Because we never know where our health is going to go. We only know where it's at today. So, some fun statistics because everybody loves statistics. The average retiree will pay close to $5,400 in out of pocket health and dental expenses per year. Now that's quite a bit. Now you'll double that if it's a couple. So that's over 10,000, close to $11,000 a year in health and dental expenses if you're a couple. 75% of Canadians over 65 have at least one health condition requiring prescription medication. Not saying it's an expensive one, but it is something that does exist. And 62% of seniors use 5 or more prescription medications. So there are costs, there are things that are not clearly covered under our healthcare in Canada. And we are extremely fortunate in Canada that we do have such wonderful healthcare, but there are items that it does not cover, and I'm going to go through that a little bit later on. So a little later on, it's actually starting right here already, but I will dive into it more as we go along. So if you think your provincial coverage is going to cover all your medical needs during retirement, it is not. Please think again when it comes to that. Yes, we do have a lot of coverage, which you're quite fortunate about, but there is stuff that has to be paid out of pocket. Prescription drugs, massage therapy, chiropractors, physiotherapists, psychologists, social workers, dental care of pretty much all kinds, private or semi private hospital rooms, wheelchairs, CPAP machines, orthotics, glasses, eye exam, hearing aids. And of course, any medical costs that arise out of province or out of country, you might have some additional costs for. Now, this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list, but these are things that you do need to consider. And a lot of these items would be covered typically in a private healthcare plan as well. The next question I get, well, doesn't Pharmacare cover me in retirement for all these prescription drugs that I'm going to need as I get older? Yes and no. I mean, there is a deductible that is owed for Pharmacare. Now, for anybody watching that is outside Manitoba, this is a specific Manitoba calculation, so please check with your applicable province. But let's call them an average retired couple. They're each making about $40,000 of investment, RIF, old age security, CPP income in retirement time. So they make $80,000 a year as a couple. Their deductible is, $5,824 for the year, which means they have to spend $5,824 on prescriptions before the government's going to add any money to that pot. So that's quite a bit of costs, and it's there to help certainly those on the lower income side, certainly those that have extraordinary medical or prescription costs that might not be paid through any other plans. That's what this is designed for. But certainly your average prescriptions probably not going to get paid when it comes to Pharmacare. So certainly check it out. Some of you might already get a letter on an annual basis telling you what your annual deductible is. Medical expense tax credit. So CRA does provide a list of eligible and non-eligible expenses and support needed. The most common ones are, medical insurance premiums, prescriptions not covered by insurance, nursing home expenses. Again, some of the other ones I've already covered, such as chiropractor, physio, dentist, and certain medical travel is all qualified to basically put it on your tax return and get the medical expense tax credit. Okay. Of course, you do want to reference the actual CRA list just to find out exactly what you can deduct on your tax return. And of course, check with your accountant. The one I'm going to point out here on the medical expense tax credit. So this is through the CRA page, just looking up what is eligible, and it has all kinds of different varying information. But the big one would be premiums paid to private health service plans. You'll see that at the very bottom, which means if you buy your own health and dental plan in retirement time to look after some of those costs and help mitigate the unknown expenses of rising health and dental costs in retirement, that can be tax deductible for you on your tax return. Of course, your amount of tax savings is going to vary based on your income level, tax bracket, but it does certainly help that you can write off some of that under the medical expense tax credit. Again, certainly check with your tax professional the specifics. Basically, as long as the medical expense premiums that you're paying are at least 90% or more being used towards eligible medical expenses. So I would say most plans should meet that definition. Just a quick reminder that if you do have questions along the way, feel free to type them in, and then we will do our best to get to them if it's not already in our presentation. Medical expense tax credit, we'll continue on that for a moment. You can pick a different time period other than a calendar year if you want to. Again, chat with your tax professional just to see what makes the most sense for how your medical expenses are being claimed. Threshold, there is a threshold. It's not like you can write off sky's the limit when it comes to medical expenses. There is very prescriptive numbers that you do have to keep up with, such as 3% of your net income threshold to an annual maximum. This is 2022 numbers, didn't have the 23 numbers yet. You can also claim them for other dependents who are relying on you for support, which can also include, your kids, can include parents if you are their sole care provider. So just always look into what options are available for your set of circumstances. Threshold, again, this is just covering, what is your tax credit based on each particular province? What's the threshold? I'm not going to go through this in depth. It is there for your reference. And of course, if you're in Quebec, they like to do their own thing. So certainly check with them as to what would be applicable in that province. So let's run through an example as to what this actually means when it comes to the medical tax credit. So here, a couple quick numbers. So a couple different scenarios based on income level for, let's say, a couple here in Manitoba. Jerry and Taylor is who we have. They live in Manitoba. They have $4,000 of medical expenses in the last 12 months. The threshold number is the same, but the 3% of net income does change based on what their income level is. So it's the lower of the above number is what they can utilize. So medical expenses, you'll see below, less the METC threshold. There's the tax credit. So then there's a federal credit, the Manitoba credit. But what is the actual dollar amount that they kind of get as a tax savings? So the lower income couple, $799 for the year is what they save on that $4,000. If you move it up towards that $90,000 mark, it is almost cut in half, let's say, $473. That's a very rough math, clearly. But anyways, that would be approximate savings. So the more money you make, the less you can get benefit for claiming that deduction. But hey, I'd rather have $800 or $500 in my pocket and get that tax savings and still have that peace of mind knowing that my medical expenses are looked after. All right, so you are retiring. What are your health insurance options? You've had the luxury of having an employer that's provided you good benefits for health and dental. You haven't really noticed the cost of it along the way. Yeah, it comes off your paycheck. The employer maybe pays part of it, you pay part of it, but somebody's paying the premiums behind the scenes. And then you're retiring and that goes away. So what options do you have? Well, you can say, I'm going to roll into my own personally owned health and dental plan at retirement. There's a chance that your employer, again, depends on the employer, has a retiree plan that you can elect to go into as well. If you want to roll into your own health and dental plan at retirement time, there is a very specific window that you have to do that. So you have to make that transition within either 60 or 90 days to prevent medical underwriting. Okay. So if you have, let's say, pre-existing conditions, you want to get coverage without having to prove that you qualify, um, that's what you want to do because they will ask no questions. You're automatically approved and you get the coverage. There are also optional underwritten plans. So if you are in perfectly good health, maybe you're not on prescriptions and you're just wanting to cover your bases for down the road, you can also apply for the underwritten plans. So you might potentially get more bang for your buck on your premiums because the insurance company feels there's less risk because they've looked under the hood as to what might be going on for your set of circumstances. There are a variety of carriers available that do provide these health and dental plans. All of them do have different levels of plans that you can purchase. All of them have different add-ons. So it's really about determining what's important for you. But at the end of the day, you do want to look at okay, I am retiring. What do I do now, right? How much is that risk of something happening or my health changing, or just making sure that I have that coverage moving forward? So when you do retire, I always say, ask yourself, what do you have for pre-existing conditions? What medications are you taking today? You might even want to look at family history, right? What is the family history of medical needs? You might have seen your parents struggle with some of these costs or another family member or friend. What coverage is the biggest priority for you? So when you're looking at the overwhelming potential number of choices in these health and dental plans, you do want to look and say, okay, well, what's covered for prescriptions? How much am I getting for dental coverage? What are the caps? What are the limits? What's the deductible? What do I want for, other things like massage and chiropractor and psychologist? What of that is the biggest priority for you in retirement time? Because some of those different things certainly drive the cost of these plans. So there's no point in paying for it if you don't find value in it. And it's worth paying for the ones that you feel you will use the most. A big one, which I suspect for most people in retirement, is travel insurance coverage, right? Um, if you don't have this, well, then you have to go and buy it separately. Some plans do include it as a standard inclusion on their plan that they'll cover, 15, 20, 30, 60 days of travel insurance. And some have it as an add-on that you have to add to the plan instead. And lastly, if you say, you know what, I'm not really sure I want to buy insurance in retirement, I don't like that idea. Okay, well, what is your ability to pay those costs out of pocket? Because at the end of the day, you have those two choices. Do I want insurance to hopefully pay for it, or do I want to pay for this as it arrives and pay out of pocket? Um, yeah, if you know exactly, you have a crystal ball, what is your health going to be like for the rest of your lifetime? Yeah, you can probably accurately predict, am I going to pay more than what I'm saving? But as with any insurance, it comes down to peace of mind and what gives you the greatest comfort in retirement time. Welcome back, Clinton.
Yeah, a couple of questions came in. One related to pre-existing conditions. Specific question, maybe you won't be able to perfectly tackle it, but it's about eyeglasses. Is that your eyesight specifically? Is that considered a pre-existing medical condition?
Not to my knowledge that I've seen. I mean, most health plans just add some vision coverage. They don't add a lot. It's like $100 to $400 every 2 years, so it's not the driver of it. Again, I'm not the underwriter, so I don't want to make a promise to you. I don't know the eye condition and if there's anything else involved, but eyeglasses, I can't see that being a major driver because it's a very minor part of most plans.
Okay, perfect. So you're touching on some of the other questions as you go here, because I mentioned before there was a question about dental. There was one about prescriptions and dental care, which I imagine you'll see a little more detail
There's a
as
bit
you
more
go through the
coming up for
presentation.
sure. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And keep the questions coming. Please type more into
Excellent.
the comment section.
All right, so health insurance life cycle. So again, just looking at everybody's life is going to be a little bit different. Different types of insurance can be important at different times in your life. Ones that you're typically going to look at throughout your entire lifetime: travel, health and dental coverage. Um, Being the insurance salesperson, life insurance of some kind, whether it's term life or permanent life, it does have their place and a different purpose throughout your lifetime. So again, it's ever evolving that you want to review what your insurance needs are based on your current situation at the time. All right, so big question is, will my retirement coverage be the same as my employer? Like when I was working, I have, phenomenal coverage. Do I get that same coverage as a retiree? And we just tell you, for most of the time, it significantly drops in your coverage level once you retire. Okay, whether that's continuing through your employer plan or whether that's purchasing your own plan, I'm going to say most of the time your coverage level actually drops. Okay, I I'm assuming the rationale is based on age and risk level, etc. But again, I can't say that for sure. So certainly you do want to compare apples to apples as best as you can. What are you getting today? Are the options available? What am I paying for this benefit? And what am I getting out of it? So this is one carrier, just an example of a couple different plan options that they do have. Obviously, there's no prices on here, but it does give you an idea as to different levels that are in place. Okay, so you can go with the most basic. It has something for prescription drugs, might not have dental covered, some vision care, some, specialist therapists such as chiro, massage, etc., are covered up to certain limitations. And then the further you go to the right side of the chart, the more coverage you get, the more dental, the more vision, the more you get for such things as massage. But of course, the further you go to the right, the more you're going to end up paying in premiums as well. So you do have to analyze and say, is this worth it based on what I'm getting out of it? Now, this is an example of what's called like a follow me type plan, where you can just roll into it, not have to prove that you qualify health wise, and just continue coverage as if you're going to work every day, but instead traveling and enjoying retirement. So let's give an example of the costs. So I have two different companies here just to show you the difference between them. So company A on the one side, company B on the other side, trying to find as similar coverage packages as I can between these two carriers. Picking, 65-year-old couple in Manitoba. What's the cost, including dental? So company A, $275 a month. Company B, $354 a month. Okay, so it looks like there's a big price difference, but what is the actual difference? Now, keep in mind, this is also what I would call a middle of the road plan. So it's not the most basic, and it's also not their most expensive plan. Okay. So if you're wanting to budget something for retirement, I'm thinking it's generally in that $200 to $400 range is a rough number. But again, it depends what bells and whistles you want to add to the plan. So of course, there is a price difference between these two plans. Everybody can see that. Um, so again, what is your priority? One of these plans has 30 days of travel included in that, and one of them has 60 days of travel included in that. One of them has a $5 million travel coverage. The other one has a $1 million travel coverage. And one of them has no lifetime cap on how much benefits you can take. And the other one has a $250,000 a cap on their benefits. So very important differentiators that you want to look at. One of them only includes ground ambulance and not air ambulance should you require that. So again, there's little differences and nuances that you do want to look at and truly determine what is your priorities, what are you willing to pay for, and what are you not willing to pay for. So when it comes to like one of these plans, a travel add-on, you might have to pay extra for as a result. Okay, so I did include that in both the prices I just showed you. But are you going to get your best bang for your buck out of that travel add-on? Okay, so just looking at it from a dollar perspective. So one plan again included 60 days of travel. Let's do the other one at 30 days. The 30-day one actually had a set price to that specific add-on. So in this case, it's $500 a year for this couple. So if they wanted to buy their own travel insurance policy for 30 days of travel, what would they end up paying as a standalone policy? Well, that would be $387 and change. So if they only took one trip a year of 30 days, it's technically cheaper to buy a separate standalone policy. Okay. But if they do two trips of 30 days, I'm picking 30 days just for round numbers, they would save about $274 a year by having the plan instead of a separate standalone travel plan. Okay, so it again depends. What are your plans in retirement? How much traveling do you want to do? There are other add-on options. Instead of 30 days, you can do 7 or 15, I think. But we can certainly customize that to what you would get the most benefit out of. Let's fast forward a few more years. As you do get older, guess what? Travel insurance does get more expensive. It does not get cheaper over time. So let's look at a 79-year-old as travel insurance for group coverage stops at age 80. And then for privately owned travel coverage, it's really as long as you continue to qualify for it. So here, again, travel insurance for 30 days through the plan is $741. If you buy a standalone policy for 30 days, it's $867. So you're already saving just on one trip there at a future age. And your savings is magnified, obviously, if you're doing more than one trip a year based on that savings, just because it does cost a lot more to get that standalone policy at that particular point in time. There's still always pre-existing condition clauses. That is really the same when we look at both of these scenarios. It really comes down to the cost that you're paying for that coverage. So the biggest one to determine is obviously, will you, the client, get enough value from the plan versus what you're paying for the premium? Okay, this is certainly always a discussion. You know, any insurance that you're paying typically is, am I going to get anything out of it versus what I'm putting into it? So let's use a scenario here. So we have 65-year-old couple, they have the 30-day add-on. Let's say they do 2 trips a year. They do try to make some of their regular claims on the policy over time. I certainly have not made an exhaustive claims list here. So their insurance costs them $4,248 for the year. Let's say they do 2 trips a year of 30 days. So that's X what the premium would cost if they had to pay it out of pocket. So I've thrown that in there as a cost. Let's say they're maximizing some of their prescription benefits. Okay, $2,600 for the year is what they're getting for bang for their buck out of that. Let's say they go see the dentist. They're spending $700 each, which is not really a hard thing to do when you go see the dentist. Spending $700. Vision, let's say one of them is getting a pair of glasses. There is a cap on vision, so I only put one person's vision here and eye exam, assuming that one person gets it 1 year, one person gets it the other year. And of course, they love going to see their massage therapist and chiropractor, because who doesn't? And mine is booked for tomorrow. Can't wait. So the total benefits that they've used is $6,200. So they technically have saved, by having the insurance coverage, almost $2,000 in costs. Now, I get that this is not necessarily going to be maybe consistent year after year as to what they're using versus what they're saving. This is a rough example, but this is something that you do want to look at and say, what of these categories am I going to get my most value out of? Because that's what's important to you. So certainly food for thought when it comes to that. Now, aside from the obvious benefits that I've already talked about, such as, prescriptions and dental and the massage and all that good stuff, there are other benefits that are tagged onto these plans and other coverages that we can go through. Um, so virtual healthcare is a thing as well. So each of these plans I've shown you so far, each have a different version of it, kind of like a virtual doctor. You can get prescription refills through them. You can do a health screening, kind of like going to a walk-in almost, if it's not nothing that requires hands-on per se. They can do specialist referrals. They can do lab test ordering for you, all of those things. I've used this service myself on healthcare plan. It is phenomenal. No lugging yourself to the doctor's office to wait forever for them to be late for an appointment. You can get it quite quickly over the phone as well. So again, this is an add-on for most of these plans that is I don't want to say free, because you're technically paying for it behind the scenes, but it's included as a value add. Okay, you might have something like this already through your work plan, which is fantastic. If not, maybe ask your employer if something like that exists. Let's dive into some of the other benefits that are included on these health and dental plans that you do get coverage for. Now, given the exhaustive list, I did not go in depth and give you the specific amounts of coverage for each of these different categories. So again, we're looking at the semi-private, private hospital rooms, the CPAP machine supplies, certain medical aids, wheelchairs, oxygen / miscellaneous equipment, medical supplies, prosthesis, wigs, personal support worker, orthotics, hearing aids, accidental dental, ambulance service. Because believe it or not, you will get a bill for using the ambulance in Manitoba. Whether that is paid by the insurance company or you have to pay it out of pocket, you will likely get a bill for the service if you do require it. And of course, there is more. So certainly look at the different plans based on what you would get out of it. And these are just some additional perks that you could certainly take advantage of if you're paying for the plan anyways. All right, nearing the end of the presentation here. So Manulife Travel Insurance is one that we can help you with here on our end. So as we're getting to the winter season, and I'm sure a lot of people do want to get away from our cold weather, considering it snowed today. I already want to go away. But there is travel insurance as an option. We can assist you with purchasing that. Super easy. We can do it all over the phone and get you the right coverage in place for what you need as you are traveling, either outside the country, outside of the province, just making sure you have the right protection in place for your needs and not have a big nasty bill if you have to visit a hospital out of province or out of country due to a medical emergency. One other quick thing before Clinton jumps in here. There is an upcoming price change for travel insurance. I think it's coming later in November, and some of the prices are increasing up to around 20% for certain age bands, I believe. So if you do have a trip coming up this winter, you want to get some insurance coverage put in place before the prices do change, certainly reach out to Clinton, Kevin, or myself so we can go ahead and help you out with that.
Perfect. This came with the prior topic, I believe, essentially looking at cost and whether or not they're pooled with carriers or looked at personally with carriers. And as a quick example here, if you spend $6,200 for a plan that cost you $4,200, will you expect to pay more next year?
It very well could. So when you buy like a group health and dental plan outside of your employer, they are looking at all the claims typically in your set age band, right? So if it's 60 to 64, they're looking at what was the total claims made for this age band, and do we need to move the needle on pricing as a result of the total claims being paid? So that very well could happen. Your price is not locked in per se. It will also go up as your age band changes. So if you're 64, it's going to change when you go to 65. Okay. Now, your plan through your employer, that is different. Those are reviewed on a company basis. So, let's say you have a company, you have 20 employees, and everybody's making lots of claims, which is what you want because you have the health plan that they're paying for. But that directly impacts the premiums that company and employees are going to pay as a result of those specific claims. So you'll see a bit more direct impact on the company specific side.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. If there are more questions, continue to type them into the comment section. We'll try our best to get to all of them.
Perfect. Don't go too far. We'll be back to you soon. All right, so we'll end off here pretty much. So I've covered a lot of information on health and dental benefits, some different pricing, some different aspects of what are your priorities. Certainly here at Canaccord, certainly with the Becker Orr Group, we want to create a valuable financial roadmap. I believe they refer to it as blueprint, but we do want to identify what are your priorities, what are your unique set of circumstances, and how can we identify opportunities or gaps, ways to help improve your situation. And especially want to give you that peace of mind as you are heading into retirement, whether that's through cash flow planning, whether that's through the adequate insurance coverage. We want to make sure that we have you well looked after in that regard. That is it for my presentation. So we're going to end off with any questions for Clinton and Kevin, for myself, if there is anything else that we haven't tackled. If not, then I think there's a wonderful website that they'll point you to if you have additional questions.
That's right. Yeah, it's on the screen there, chatwithclintonkevin.com. You certainly can type them in the comments section. We'll hang around for a minute or two more in case the questions come in. We did have one or two comments about the slides. Hopefully they're clear for everyone. If they were a little blurry, well, we could always send a PDF of the presentation if you find that helpful. We just need to know where to send it. So you can email myself or Kevin, one of us, and then we'd be happy just to send back.
There'll be a replay as well, if in case there was just a computer lag.
Also a good idea. Yes. Yeah, this is being recorded, so maybe it's just a computer lag that's creating the blur issue. That'll be posted on our YouTube page, I believe, tomorrow. So you can always check our YouTube page and watch the replay and see if that improves the issue. We had a question come in here while I was rambling away there. The question here, compared to the U.S., are we better protected in our retirement years, in your opinion? So they're asking Adam about benefit packages. I'm not sure if you know all the details of the U.S. packages.
About the U.S. packages.
I'm going to say I don't know the answer to that question. I haven't done a comparison between Canada and the U.S. in that regard. I know, we certainly have the advantage of having universal health care for the most part,
Yes.
which does cover a lot of the major expenses that would come up. But no, it's not perfect. It doesn't cover everything. I mean, people in the States do have to spend, exorbitant amount of money every year, even throughout their working years, on insurance coverage to make sure they can, not go bankrupt if they have an unexpected health emergency. Versus with us, we don't have necessarily that concern that I'm going to have a heart attack and it's going to bankrupt me as a result of going to the hospital.
Yeah, it covers a lot here in Canada. It doesn't cover everything, which is what you mentioned. There could be some additional items you'd want covered as part of your benefit package. But compared to the US, the government portion does cover a lot.
Good question, though.
Good. There's no additional questions coming in. We'll point you to chatwithclintonkevin.com. So if there is something that's coming up afterwards, or if you're watching the replay, you could always go with chatwithclintonkevin.com and ask your question that way. It does come right to us, and we can try to get back to everyone that goes to that website. So please feel free to fill in the form, send in your questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Anything you wanted to add, Kevin?
No, I think you've covered everything. I can just sit here and listen to the great information that we've gotten from Adam and make sure that we present this to everybody going forward.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.